Today, we're diving into a really powerful and maybe a little controversial economic idea. Prejudice is free, but discrimination has costs. Think about that for a second. What if there's a built-in financial penalty for bias in the real world? It's a provocative question, and it's the central idea we're going to explore today. So, to really get our heads around this, we're going to follow the logic step by step, using the detailed analysis from scholar Stephen Farron's work as our guide. And here it is, the core thesis. This observation originally comes from the economist Thomas Sowell. This single sentence is pretty much the key that unlocks everything we're about to look at. It basically argues there's a huge difference between just a belief and an actual action. Okay, so what is that difference exactly? Let's break it down. Prejudice, that's just an internal belief, right? A thought or a feeling. It doesn't cost you a penny to think something. Discrimination, though, that's an action. That's when you take that belief and do something with it in the real world. And according to this principle, that action always has a price tag. So how does this cost actually work? Well, in a competitive market, it's a pretty simple three-step process. First, imagine a business owner who passes on the best person for the job because of some personal bias. Okay, now step two. A competitor who only cares about the bottom line immediately hires that talented person you just rejected. And the third and most crucial step, that competitor now has a better team. They become more efficient, more profitable. The first owner has literally just paid a price for their discrimination. Now, theory is one thing, but does this actually hold up in the real world? To find out, we're going to turn to Malaysia, a country that basically put this very principle to the test on a massive scale. First, you need some context. Malaysia's population is about 60% Malay, who are the majority, along with pretty big Chinese and Indian minorities. Trust me, these demographics are absolutely central to the whole story. Now, the history of the Chinese minority here is so important. They didn't show up with a bunch of advantages. It was the complete opposite. They came as poor laborers and faced layer after layer of systemic discrimination and even outright persecution, from British colonial rule all the way through the country's independence.
And this is where the story takes this incredible turn. I mean, despite every single barrier put in their way, the Chinese community didn't just survive, they thrived. They achieved a level of success that was just, honestly, astounding.
Let's look at some of the numbers. Get this, by 1970, a whopping 85% of all retail businesses in Malaysia were owned by the Chinese minority. That single statistic just perfectly captures their dominance in the small business world. And it wasn't just in business. In education, the numbers are even more stark. Even with policies designed to help Malay students in the 1960s, Chinese students earned 22 times more science degrees and an incredible 102 times more engineering degrees. That's not just a small gap, it's an absolute chasm of expertise in really critical fields. And all that educational achievement, it translated directly into professional dominance. By 1970, if you looked at the country's most vital professions, architects, doctors, business leaders, they were overwhelmingly shaped by this minority group. Their expertise became totally indispensable to the Malaysian economy. So the government sees this imbalance, and they respond with one of the most ambitious affirmative action programs in history, the New Economic Policy, or NEP. The stated goal? To completely re-engineer the entire economy to create what they called racial balance. The NEP's goals were incredibly specific. It wasn't vague at all. They set a hard target, 30% Malay ownership of the entire economy by the year 1990. And on top of that, it demanded that hiring at every single level should mirror the country's demographics. So what happened? Well, what we see is a tale of two sectors. In the public sector, places without direct competition like universities and government jobs, the policy worked. Malay numbers shot way up. But in the competitive private sector, it was a completely different story. The goals were eventually just abandoned because they were hurting the economy. And get this, the percentage of Chinese professionals actually went up. And why did it fail so badly? Well, this brings us right back to our central theme. In the private market, profit is king. The pressure to be efficient and to hire the absolute best person for the job was so strong that it forced people to find clever ways to get around the rules. One of the most common strategies was something called Alibabism. Basically, a Malay person, Ali, would be the official owner on paper, which satisfied the law. But the real control, the person actually running the business day-to-day, remained with the Chinese partner, Baba. It was a genius workaround driven by pure economic reality.
Now, you don't have to take my word for it. This brutally honest assessment came from the Prime Minister of Malaysia himself, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, one of the main architects of the whole policy. Even he had to acknowledge the fundamental economic force that his own policies just couldn't beat.
Okay, so this is the crucial point. If the policy didn't achieve its economic goals for the masses, who did it actually help? The source argues that the benefits never really trickled down. The Malay poverty rate didn't get better, and the overall income gap stayed exactly the same. The real winners? A tiny, politically connected elite who were put in charge of all the new state-run companies.
So, after walking through this incredible, detailed case study, what's the big takeaway here? Let's try and summarize what the Malaysian example really shows us.
The argument being presented here in the source material is this. When people are acting as individuals in a competitive market, as employers, as customers, as partners, their own rational self-interest is an unbelievably powerful force. And even a massive state-mandated discrimination policy will have a really hard time overcoming it.
Which, of course, leaves us with one final big question. Was Malaysia just a one-off, a unique situation because of its specific history and people? Or does it reveal something more fundamental, maybe even a universal pattern in how people behave when their principles clash with their wallets? To explore that very question, our next explainer is going to take us to another country with a deeply complex history of racial policy, South Africa. We're going to apply this exact same economic lens and see if history really does repeat itself.